All right, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a narrative that, well, it challenges something most of us take for granted: the shape of our world. We're going to walk through the arguments, the supposed evidence, and the whole story presented by people who are seriously questioning whether we live on a globe.
So the whole thing kicks off with a really potent question. Think about it. In an age where everything is moderated, just asking about the shape of the Earth can get you labeled as promoting harmful thought. The narrative really leans into this, asking why? Why is this question so heavily guarded? Is it just because the science is settled, or is something else going on?
And that question brings us right to the first part of the argument. The idea here is that maybe, just maybe, what we call settled science isn't quite as set in stone as we think. The source claims that some really big names in science have had their own doubts, and not for scientific reasons, but for philosophical ones.
Okay, check this out. The source points to guys like Edwin Hubble and Stephen Hawking. They supposedly admitted to rejecting the geocentric model, the idea that Earth is the center of everything. But the reason they gave, it wasn't about the data. They said the whole thought of being at the center of the universe was just emotionally disturbing. Pretty wild, right? And that idea is reinforced with this next quote, attributed to physicist George Ellis. He's quoted as saying, "You literally cannot disprove the geocentric model. You can only rule it out on philosophical grounds." So the point being made is that this whole massive debate was essentially closed because of a feeling, not because of hard science. Now, to back all this up, the narrative points to a big historical moment, the Michelson-Morley experiment back in the 1880s. This is presented as a huge deal. The claim is that this experiment was supposed to detect the Earth's motion through space, but instead, it found nothing. It supposedly proved the Earth was stationary, a result that the source says was a serious embarrassment for Albert Einstein. All right, so after questioning the historical science, the argument shifts gears. It moves from these old experiments and quotes to something you can supposedly see for yourself. We're getting into part two, the problem with curvature. So here's where it gets really interesting. On one hand, you have the globe model, which says that at sea level, you can only see for about 3 miles before things disappear over the curve. But then you have this picture. It's the Chicago skyline, clear as day, photographed from almost 60 miles away. So how is that even possible?
And let's just put a number on that to really let it sink in. According to the source's math, based on the accepted curvature of the Earth, the top of Chicago's tallest building should be 900 feet below the horizon. 900 feet. It shouldn't just be hard to see, it should be physically impossible to see. And yet, there it is.
So what's the official explanation for this impossible photo? Well, the source points out that the news reports called it a mirage, a trick of the light. But the narrative pushes back on that, asking, really? A mirage? Can a mirage be that crisp, that clear, that perfect? And the Chicago skyline isn't presented as some one-off fluke either. The source lists other examples, like lighthouses that are visible from way, way further than they should be, or weapons guidance systems that apparently operate as if the Earth is a flat plane. Even the classic ship disappearing over the horizon is explained away as just an optical illusion that a good zoom lens can fix. Okay, all of this so far builds to what is really the climax of the whole narrative. This is the part that, according to the source, ties everything together. We're on to part 3, Antarctica, but not as a continent at the bottom of the globe, but as a great ice wall. Just look at the numbers here, because they're pretty staggering. On a globe, the circumference of Antarctica is supposed to be around 12,000 miles. Simple enough. But the source brings up Captain Cook's voyage, where he's supposedly traveled more than 60,000 miles trying to circle it, and he never could. That's a huge discrepancy, and it's presented as a major, major puzzle. So how could that possibly make sense? Well, the argument points to this map right here, the azimuthal equidistant projection. On this map, the Earth is a flat disk, with the North Pole in the middle. And Antarctica? It's not a continent at the bottom. It's a gigantic ice wall that surrounds all the oceans and continents. And the kicker? The source is quick to point out that this is the exact map you see in the logo for the United Nations. Now, at the very heart of this whole Antarctica story is one man, Admiral Richard E. Byrd. And the source makes a big deal about his credibility. We're talking a Medal of Honor winner, the youngest admiral in Navy history. He led this massive operation to Antarctica called Operation High Jump. And when he came back, he talked about finding a huge unexplored land full of resources, a land bigger than the United States, beyond the pole. But here's where the story really gets laid out like a conspiracy thriller. It's all about the timeline. First, you've got the Nazis setting up a base there in '39. Then Admiral Byrd leads this huge military force down there in 47. Then Byrd dies suddenly right before the Antarctic Treaty gets signed in 59, which basically bans all public travel. And at the exact same time, NASA is created, and our focus shifts from exploring our own world to exploring outer space.
So you can see how that timeline leads us to the final part of this whole narrative. After all these supposed scientific anomalies and this highly suspicious chain of events, the source asks the one big question that's been hanging in the air this whole time. What are they hiding?
And the argument is that this isn't just history, it's still happening today. The source points to modern-day rules. Public travel is strictly forbidden south of the 60th parallel. It's claimed that nobody has ever actually circumnavigated the continent, and commercial planes are not allowed to fly over it. All of this is presented as evidence of an active, ongoing cover-up.
And that brings the whole thing right up to today. The narrative leaves us with this thought. Why are we spending trillions of dollars to go to Mars when there's supposedly a vast, unexplored continent potentially full of resources right here on our own world that is completely off limits? And so, this entire narrative ends with one final, very provocative challenge. The question is simple. If this whole theory is so crazy and so easy to disprove, why not just put it to rest once and for all? Why not fund a fully public, fully documented expedition to circumnavigate Antarctica and show everyone the truth? That's the question we're left with.